A 75-year-old grandma prepared her last cake and moved the entire United States. What she did with her trembling hands went far beyond a recipe. It revealed family secrets kept for decades and touched the heart of her distant granddaughter, who returned home. A story that will make you cry and smile at the same time, showing how love transcends generations and overcomes any distance. Get ready for an emotional journey. Leave your like, subscribe, and comment on which city you are watching from. The unmistakable aroma of cinnamon and vanilla danced through the air of the small kitchen, with walls yellowed by time. The old wooden house nestled in the verdant hills of Vermont seemed to breathe in sync with the meticulous movements of Mrs. Eleanor. Her wrinkled fingers, marked by decades of work and affection, trembled slightly as she spread the frosting over the golden cake that had just come out of the oven. It was not a tremor of fragility, but of contained emotion, as if each gesture carried the weight of a lifetime of untold stories. Outside, the fine January rain kissed the clay roofs and the old stones of the pavement. The gray sky framed the distant mountains, creating a veil of mystery over the small town of Willow Creek, where time insisted on flowing slower than in the rest of the world. The heavy clouds seemed guardians of ancient secrets, just as Eleanor's heart guarded hers. The wall clock, silent witness of generations, marked 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the sound of tires on gravel interrupted the quiet. Eleanor adjusted the apron embroidered with small flowers, a gift from her late mother, and took a deep breath. She knew exactly who was arriving. The letter she had sent 3 weeks ago had finally worked, even though it contained only a yellowed photograph and a small piece of paper with the recipe for the cornbread cake that now perfumed every corner of the house. The front door creaked open, as it always had since Robert installed it with his own hands 50 years ago. And there she was, Ashley, with her hair styled in the capital fashion, the camera hanging around her neck like an extension of her own being, and eyes that carried the weight of someone who had searched the whole world, except for her own roots. "Grandma?" The hesitant voice echoed through the narrow hallway. Eleanor's eyes instantly welled up, but she did not allow the tears to fall. Not yet. There was so much to do, so much to reveal. So many secrets kept for decades in locked drawers, in shoeboxes hidden in the wardrobe lining, in silences cultivated during Sunday dinners that became increasingly rare until they ceased completely. "In the kitchen, my dear. Come, the tea is ready." Ashley left the small travel bag in the hallway and followed the aroma that brought back memories of a distant childhood. Each step on the wooden floor was like turning the page of a book she had abandoned halfway through. When she finally entered the kitchen, she stopped under the door frame, absorbing the scene as she would with a photograph worthy of the front page. Her grandma, smaller and more fragile than she remembered, in front of the wood-burning stove that remained exactly in the same place, as if time had frozen within those walls, while the world outside kept spinning. Long time, isn't it? Mrs. Eleanor turned slowly, her eyes scanning every inch of her granddaughter, like someone trying to decipher a complex work of art. 5 years, 2 months, and 14 days, to be more precise. Ashley felt the weight of that precise count. Her grandma had always been like that, meticulous with details that to others would seem insignificant. It was as if time were a recipe that needed to be followed to the letter, each second measured with the same precision she measured the cornmeal for her perfect cakes. "I've been busy." The word sounded empty even to Ashley. How to explain that she had fled from her origins so deliberately? How to justify the unreturned calls, the missed Thanksgivings, the birthdays remembered only with rushed cards? "My work demands a lot, Grandma. New York never stops." "And the heart, doesn't it stop either?" The simple question cut through the air like a sharp knife cuts a freshly baked cake. Eleanor did not wait for an answer. She indicated the worn straw chair. "Sit down. We need to talk." Ashley obeyed, feeling again like the 7-year-old girl who broke her Italian great-grandmother's crystal glasses and then tried to glue the shards together before anyone noticed. The feeling of guilt was the same, but the shards were now of another kind, much harder to put together. "Why did you call me here so urgently, Grandma? What happened? Is it about your health?" The questions came in a burst, like flashes from a camera trying to capture something in motion. Eleanor served a generous slice of the still warm cake and pushed the plate towards her granddaughter. Her movements were deliberate, as if each gesture were part of a sacred ritual. "Try it first, then we'll talk." Ashley hesitated, but the aroma was irresistible. She picked up the fork and cut a small piece, taking it to her mouth with ceremony. The flavor exploded in her tongue like a revelation. It was exactly as she remembered, maybe even better. It was as if each ingredient carried a different memory. The cornmeal recalled Sunday afternoons on the porch. The sugar brought the sound of laughter during the summer fairs in the churchyard. The cinnamon evoked winter nights around the wood-burning stove listening to ghost stories. "It's the same as always," Ashley commented, more to herself than to her grandma. "No," Eleanor shook her head slowly. "This one is different. This is the last one." The word "last" hung in the air like the fog that covered the mountains on winter mornings. Ashley felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean the last one? You're not..." The words choked, refusing to materialize the sudden fear that consumed her. Eleanor laughed, a brief laugh that momentarily illuminated her face marked by deep wrinkles, each one telling a different story. "I'm not dying, girl, at least not faster than everyone else." She made a dramatic pause, savoring the moment. "I'm retiring. This is the last cake I make following your great-grandmother's original recipe." Ashley put down her fork, confused. "And why would that be so important as to call me with such urgency?" It was then that the back door opened without warning, bringing with it a gust of cold wind and a burly figure that Ashley recognized immediately, despite the years that had passed. It was Michael, the milkman's son, now a man in his 40s, with prematurely gray hair at the temples and the same wide smile that Ashley remembered from her childhood. "Mrs. Eleanor, I brought the documents you asked for," and he stopped. When he noticed Ashley, his eyes widening in genuine surprise. "Ashley, is that really you? Geez, long time no see." The pieces began to fit together in Ashley's mind even before anyone could explain. Whatever was happening, it was not just about a cake or an old recipe. It was something bigger, something that involved the entire community. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking from her grandma to Michael, who was now placing a folder of documents on the solid wood table. Eleanor exchanged a knowing glance with Michael before answering, her eyes shining with a determination that Ashley had not seen for years. "It turns out, my dear, that our village is about to disappear." She made a sweeping gesture with her hands, as if she could encompass the entire town in that movement. "The dairy factory is going bankrupt. Without it, half the families here will lose their source of income. Willow Creek will become a ghost town in less than a year." "And what does that have to do with your cake?" Ashley questioned, feeling that there was much more to this story than met the eye. Michael opened the folder and pulled out a colorful leaflet. "National Traditional Food Contest." He read the title aloud. "The winner not only receives a cash prize, but also closes a contract with the largest supermarket chain in the country to market their product." "And you think a cornbread cake is going to save a dairy factory?" Ashley could not contain her tone of disbelief. "It's not just a cornbread cake." Eleanor's voice acquired an unexpected solemnity. "It's the history of this place. It's the soul of the people who live here. And yes, it can save the factory, because the original recipe calls for 3 different types of dairy products that are only produced here, with techniques that your great-grandfather brought from Italy almost a century ago." A dense silence filled the kitchen. Outside, the rain had increased, drumming on the roof like impatient fingers. Ashley suddenly felt small in the face of the magnitude of what was at stake. It was not just a cooking contest or the economic future of a small inland town. It was something deeper, something related to the roots she had tried so hard to cut. "And what do you want from me exactly?" Ashley finally asked, although she already suspected the answer. Eleanor stretched out her arm and covered her granddaughter's hand with hers. Her grandma's skin was warm despite the cold and rough like the paper of an old photograph. "I want you to tell our story, Ashley. With your photographs, with your words. I want you to be my eyes and my hands on this journey. But why me? Why now? Eleanor again exchanged a look with Michael, who discreetly nodded and left the kitchen, leaving Grandma and granddaughter alone. When the door closed behind him, the old lady got up with some difficulty and walked to a small dresser, leaning against the opposite wall. From one of the drawers, she removed a carved wooden box as old as she herself seemed to be. Because there are things that can only be told at the right time, to the right person. She returned to the table and placed the box in front of Ashley. And because my hands are not what they used to be, arthritis is getting worse. This really will be my last cake, at least made entirely by me. Ashley opened the box carefully. Inside, she found a collection of old photographs, newspaper clippings yellowed by time, and a small notebook with a worn leather cover. In the first photograph, a young Eleanor, no more than 20 years old, posed smiling next to an elegant man in a suit in front of a restaurant whose facade displayed in Art Deco letters, "Flavors of America." "Who is this man with you, Grandma?" Ashley asked, intrigued. "Richard Miller, one of the most famous chefs in the United States in the 50s. Eleanor replied, a strange glint in her eyes. "My mentor, my tormentor, and the man who stole more than just my recipes." The next 2 hours were like diving into a three-dimensional photo album. Each image, each newspaper clipping revealed a completely unknown facet of Mrs. Eleanor. She was not just the grandma who made wonderful cakes on a wood-burning stove in rural Vermont. She had been an award-winning chef, a pioneer in valuing regional American ingredients at a time when haute cuisine only had eyes for European techniques and flavors. "Why have you never told me this before?" Ashley questioned, leafing through a 1952 article that effusively praised the innovative creations of the young Vermont chef who is revolutionizing the New York gastronomic scene. Eleanor sighed deeply, as if the weight of decades could finally be relieved. Because it hurt too much to remember, because there was shame mixed with pride, because some stories need time to mature like a good cheese. She smiled melancholically. And maybe because no one ever really asked. The last statement hit Ashley like a punch to the stomach. It was true. In her rush to build a career, to distance herself from what she considered the provincial simplicity of her origins, she had never really asked her grandma about her past, her dreams, her pains. "What happened? Why did you leave everything behind?" Eleanor's countenance hardened momentarily, like the crust of a bread that spends too long in the oven. "Richard and I were close. More than mentor and apprentice should be. He was married, I was young and naive. When I found out I was expecting a child, your father, Richard panicked. In the same week he presented at the International Food Festival, a complete menu based on recipes I developed using techniques and ingredients from my family. Recipes that had never left this kitchen before I took them to New York." Ashley felt the blood boil in her veins. "He stole your work and gained worldwide fame with it," Eleanor completed, without apparent bitterness in her voice, just a statement of facts. "Meanwhile, he spread rumors about my character in the gastronomic community. No one would hire me after that, especially being a single mother in 1953. And you just accepted it? You came back here and pretended nothing had happened?" Ashley could not understand how her grandma, always so strong and determined in her memories, could have conformed to such injustice. Eleanor smiled, a serene smile that did not match the gravity of the story she had just told. "No, dear. I came back here and rebuilt my life. I met your grandpa, a good man who loved your father, as if he were his own blood. I raised my family, preserved my recipes, shared my knowledge with whoever wanted to learn. Isn't that what matters in the end? The legacy we leave behind?" Ashley felt warm tears run down her face. There was so much dignity in that small, white-haired woman, so much quiet strength. How could she have stayed away for so long, thinking there was nothing to learn there? And now this Richard Miller will be one of the judges at the national contest. Michael's deep voice surprised the two women. He had returned to the kitchen without them noticing, bringing with him a folder of documents. "I just confirmed. He rarely participates in these events, but it seems that this year's theme, rescuing forgotten flavors, piqued his interest. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving in the air that particular smell of wet earth that precedes dusk in the Vermont mountains. This changes everything, doesn't it? Ashley finally verbalized what everyone was thinking. On the contrary, Eleanor stood up, suddenly energized. This changes absolutely nothing. We are going to participate in this contest. We are going to rescue these recipes, and we are going to show the world the true value of the gastronomy that was born in these mountains. In the weeks that followed, Mrs. Eleanor's small kitchen transformed into a gastronomic laboratory where past and present intertwined like the ingredients of a complex recipe. Ashley, who initially planned to stay only a few days, canceled her commitments in New York and immersed herself, body and soul, in the project. Each morning began with Eleanor sharing stories about the origin of a particular ingredient or technique. While her wrinkled hands kneaded, cut, mixed, her voice brought to life characters and places long forgotten. The Italian great-grandmother who introduced the use of nutmeg in traditional Vermont recipes. The old farmer who cultivated a specific type of wheat only for Mrs. Eleanor's cornbread cake. The afternoons of confectionery with the nuns from the local bakery, who kept centuries-old secrets about the art of crystallizing fruits. Ashley meticulously documented everything, her photographic skills capturing not only the culinary process, but the soul behind each gesture. As the weeks passed, she noticed a transformation taking place not only in the images she produced, but in herself. It was as if each story told by her grandma filled a void that she did not even know existed in her chest. Michael appeared almost daily, bringing with him the freshest products from the dairy factory and news from the outside world. Through him, Ashley discovered that the small town was mobilizing around the contest. Local artisans worked on making a special packaging for the cake. The history teacher at the municipal school organized an exhibition on the evolution of regional cuisine. Even the priest had dedicated a Sunday sermon to the importance of preserving culinary traditions as part of cultural identity. It's more than a contest for them, Michael explained one afternoon while helping to carry sacks of flour to the pantry. It's a chance to be seen, to have their story valued, to prove to themselves that they still matter in a world that seems increasingly inclined to forget them. Ashley perfectly understood the feeling. Was not that exactly what she sought? In her work as a photojournalist, to give visibility to the invisible, to tell stories that would otherwise remain in the shadows. The irony of having traveled the world in search of this, only to find it in her own childhood backyard, did not escape her. On a particularly hot August afternoon, while testing a new variation of the traditional frosting, Mrs. Eleanor's hands failed. The porcelain bowl that had belonged to her mother slipped between her arthritic fingers and shattered on the ceramic floor. At the very moment the sound of breaking dishes echoed through the kitchen, the expression on the old lady's face transformed. It was not just sadness over the loss of an object of sentimental value. It was something deeper, more devastating. The perception of her own fragility. "My hands are no longer good for even holding a bowl," she murmured, silent tears running down her wrinkled face. "How am I going to prepare a cake for a national contest?" Ashley felt her heart clench. She knelt beside her grandma and took her trembling hands in her own. "Your hands have served to create culinary works of art for over 60 years, Grandma. They served to cradle my father, to teach me to take my first steps, to comfort people. In moments of pain, and to celebrate moments of joy, they deserve to rest now. But without my hands, who will make the cake? Who will keep our traditions alive?" Eleanor's voice was small, almost childlike in its vulnerability. "I will," Ashley replied, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "You will be my hands now, in the same way that you have been my heart during all these years that I have been away." Eleanor's eyes widened in surprise. "But you barely know how to fry an egg, girl." Ashley laughed, feeling a lightness she had not experienced for years. "Then we have a lot of work ahead of us, don't we?" The following 2 weeks were an intricate dance of trial and error. Ashley, accustomed to the precision required by photography, discovered that cooking allowed, and sometimes even demanded, a flexibility that defied all her preconceived notions. It was not enough to follow the recipe to the letter. It was necessary to feel the dough, to understand how the air humidity affected the baking time, to recognize the exact moment when a syrup reached the ideal point by the subtle change in its consistency. Cooking is not an exact science, it's a conversation, Eleanor patiently explained with each new failure of her granddaughter. You need to listen to what the ingredients are telling you. One night, after a particularly disastrous attempt that resulted in a completely crumbled cake, Ashley found her grandma sitting alone on the porch, contemplating the stars that shone intensely in the clear mountain sky. Without saying a word, she sat down beside her on the old wooden swing that creaked gently with each movement. I never told you why this cake is so special, did I? Eleanor broke the silence, her voice merging with the nocturnal sounds of crickets and frogs. Ashley shook her head negatively, waiting. When your grandpa asked me to marry him, I was still very hurt by what had happened in New York. I was afraid to trust, to give myself again. He then asked me to teach him how to make this cake, saying that if he could prepare it exactly like me, he would prove that he could understand my soul. And did he succeed? Ashley asked, fascinated. Eleanor smiled, a smile full of sweet memories. No, the cake was horrible, completely inedible. She laughed at Ashley's confused expression. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that he tried. And by trying, he showed that he was willing to enter my world, to understand my language, to share what was truly important to me. And that's when you realized you loved him? That's when I realized that true love is not about doing everything perfectly, Eleanor corrected gently. It's in the willingness to make a mess together and then clean the kitchen side by side. Ashley. Let the words sink deep into her being. How many times had she abandoned relationships, projects, places at the first sign of imperfection? How many connections had she lost for fear of not meeting expectations or of not receiving back the same level of perfection she demanded of herself? I think I finally understood the real secret of the recipe, Grandma, she whispered, resting, her head on the old lady's shoulder. And what would that be? It's not the ingredients, not even the technique. It's the love we put into it. It's the story we tell through it. Eleanor nodded, her eyes shining in the silver light of the moon. Exactly. And that's why tomorrow we're going to try again. And the day after tomorrow, if necessary. And the day after that too. Until your hands learn what your heart already knows. On the morning of the contest, the sun rose timidly behind the mountains, painting the sky with shades ranging from pale pink to intense orange. Ashley woke up even before the first crow of the rooster, her stomach full of nervous butterflies. In recent days, after numerous attempts, she had finally managed to produce a cake that Eleanor herself considered worthy of her ancestors. But would it be enough? The small town seemed to have awakened in the same state of mind. When Ashley and Eleanor left the house, they found the street decorated with colorful flags and support posters. A caravan of 3 buses waited in the main square. Practically the entire population had decided to accompany the pair to the state capitol, where the contest would be held. It looks like we're taking all of Willow Creek with us, Ashley commented, moved by the demonstration of community unity. And we are, Eleanor replied, clutching the small carved wooden box she carried in her arms. Inside it, in addition to the documents needed for registration, were some of the old photographs and the original recipe notebook of her great-grandmother. It's not just our name that will be on that stage today. It's the name of everyone who came before us and everyone who will come after. The 3-hour trip to the Capitol was punctuated by traditional songs led by the elders and stories about culinary contests of the past. Ashley took the opportunity to capture images of those faces full of hope and determination. In every wrinkle, in every smile, in every look, there was a story that deserved to be told. When they finally arrived at the convention center where the event would be held, the reality of the competition they would face became apparent. Dozens of teams from all over the country unloaded sophisticated equipment, exotic ingredients, impeccable uniforms. In comparison, The small Vermont delegation, with their simple forms and ingredients grown in red earth backyards, seemed to have come from another era. "Don't let yourself be intimidated," Michael whispered, noticing Ashley's worried expression. "Remember what your grandma always says. True flavor is not bought in department stores." The process of setting up the workstation was an exercise in community collaboration. While Ashley organized the ingredients according to the order of use, Eleanor supervised every detail, her experienced eyes missing nothing. Around them, the inhabitants of Willow Creek were divided between helping and exploring the environment, many of them visiting the capital for the first time in their lives. It was during this moment of relative tranquility that Ashley saw him, Richard Miller, in person. Even at 90 years old, he maintained the elegant posture and penetrating gaze she had seen in the old photographs. He walked among the workstations like a monarch inspecting his domains, occasionally stopping to greet competitors or take pictures with fans. "It's him," Ashley murmured to her grandma, who was turned away organizing the utensils. "Richard Miller." Eleanor turned slowly, her eyes immediately finding the figure of her former mentor. For a moment, time seemed to suspend its flow. 60 years dissolved into the air like sugar in hot water. "Go ahead," Michael encouraged, placing a gentle hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "Tell him who you are, what he did." But Eleanor just shook her head, an enigmatic smile on her lips. "There's no need, he will know soon." The contest began punctually at noon. Competitors had 4 hours to prepare their creations, which would be judged by a panel of experts led by Richard Miller. The traditional American cakes category was the last to be evaluated, which meant that Ashley and Eleanor would have several hours of anxious waiting. As time passed, the tension in the Vermont team increased. The news coming from the other categories was not encouraging. The judges seemed to favor modern reinterpretations of traditional dishes, with elaborate presentations and unexpected flavor combinations. Mrs. Eleanor's cake, in contrast, was the very definition of traditional. No frills, no extravagant decorative elements, just the simple perfection of a centuries-old recipe. "Maybe we should have modernized the presentation more," Ashley commented, worried, while watching the jury effusively praise a deconstructed milk pudding presented by a famous chef from New York. "Modernize?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow, her voice carrying a tone of mild disapproval. "What is there to modernize in perfection, my dear? This cake has not survived wars, economic crises, and gastronomic revolutions by chance. It has endured because it is authentic, and authenticity never goes out of style." Finally, the moment of truth arrived. Ashley positioned herself at the designated workstation, with Eleanor sitting in a high chair beside her, ready to guide each step. The rest of the team and the residents of Willow Creek formed a small, organized cheering squad, ready to support their representative. While the other competitors immediately began working on their elaborate creations, Ashley did something unexpected. She picked up the microphone that was available for communication with the public and began to speak. "Before starting, I would like to tell a story." Her voice echoed through the hall, attracting curious glances. "This is not just the story of a cake. It is the story of a woman who dedicated her life to preserving flavors that tell who we are and where we come from." A gradual silence took over the environment. Even the other competitors stopped to listen. 60 years ago, this woman, my grandmother, was one of the pioneers of regional American gastronomy. Her creations revolutionized the way the United States looked at its own cuisine, at a time when valuing native ingredients was almost an act of rebellion. Ashley's eyes met Richard Miller's at the judges' table. He maintained an impassive expression, but something in his posture suggested tension. However, like so many other women of her generation, she saw her work appropriated by others. She saw her recipes, developed over generations of women in our family, presented at international festivals without any recognition. A murmur ran through the audience. Miller adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. "Today, we are not here just to compete. We are here to rescue a story that has been silenced, to give voice back to a woman who chose to rebuild her life with dignity, even when everything was taken from her." Ashley made a dramatic pause, her eyes scanning the now completely attentive audience. And we will do this in the most powerful way we know, through the flavor that has marked generations and built memories that time has failed to erase. With these words, Ashley began to prepare the cake, following exactly her grandma's instructions. As she worked, she narrated each step, explaining the origin of each ingredient, the reason for each technique. It was not just a recipe being executed. It was a life story being told through flour, eggs, butter, and sugar. What no one expected, not even Eleanor, was that Ashley would begin to sing while stirring the cake batter. It was an old lullaby that her great-grandmother sang while cooking, passed down from generation to generation. The simple melody and the words in archaic English created an almost magical atmosphere in the hall. Gradually, the voices of the residents of Willow Creek joined hers, creating an improvised chorus that echoed between the modern walls of the convention center. When the cake was finally ready and presented to the judges, there was no one who was not moved. Even the most experienced competitors watched with respect the powerful simplicity of that presentation. Richard Miller was the first to taste it. His hands, as wrinkled as Eleanor's, trembled slightly as he brought the fork to his mouth. The moment the flavor touched his tongue, a visible transformation occurred in his countenance. It was as if decades had been peeled away, revealing the young chef he once was, passionate about the purity of American flavors. Eleanor. He pronounced the name as someone who rediscovers a long-forgotten word. "Is it really you?" Mrs. Eleanor rose from her chair and walked slowly to the judges' table. Her eyes, framed by deep wrinkles, met those of her former mentor. "Yes, Richard, it's me. And this is my granddaughter, Ashley. She is my hands now, just as one day I was yours." A dense silence filled the hall. Everyone could feel that they were witnessing something bigger than a simple culinary contest. "I have dreamed of this moment for decades." Richard finally spoke, his voice broken by emotion. "I have dreamed of being able to ask your forgiveness for what I did, for having stolen not only your recipes, but your dreams." The public confession left the audience in a state of shock. Television cameras covering the event captured every word, every expression. "I did not come here for revenge, Richard," Eleanor replied with dignity. "I came to reclaim my place in history, to show that our traditions are greater than our human flaws, and to ensure that the knowledge that my great-grandmother passed on to my grandmother, who passed on to my mother, who passed on to me, and who now passes on to my granddaughter, is not lost in time." The other judges watched the scene astonished, but when the time came to announce the winners, there was no doubt in their minds. Mrs. Eleanor's traditional cornbread cake, through the hands of Ashley, not only won in the category, but was declared the grand champion of the national contest. While the small town of Willow Creek celebrated frantically, Richard Miller approached Eleanor again, this time away from microphones and cameras. "Your cake has always been perfect, Eleanor, but there was one ingredient I could never replicate no matter how hard I tried," he confessed with tears in his eyes. "Love. The love you put into every step of the preparation." Eleanor smiled without bitterness or resentment. "That is the secret that could never be stolen, Richard. And it is the most precious legacy I can leave." 3 months later, the Willow Creek Dairy Factory had not only been saved, but was expanding its operations to meet the national demand for Mrs. Eleanor's cake, now sold throughout the country. The small town saw an economic and cultural rebirth, with tourists arriving daily to see the place that produced the cake that reconquered the United States. On the porch of the old wooden house, Ashley and Eleanor swung gently in the rocking chair, watching the setting sun gild the distant mountains. Between them, a newly printed photo album documented the entire journey, from the first failed attempts in the small kitchen to the glorious moment of victory on the national stage. "So, are you going to stay?" Eleanor asked, the question that had been hanging in the air for weeks. Ashley smiled, her gaze fixed on the horizon where new possibilities seemed to bloom like flowers after the rain. "Yes, Grandma, I'm going to stay. There are so many stories here that deserve to be told, so many recipes that need to be preserved, so much love that is waiting to be rediscovered. Eleanor nodded, satisfied. Her wrinkled and trembling hands found those of her granddaughter, creating a bridge between past and future. You know, Ashley, I always said that the last cake would be the most important one I ever made. And it was. Not because it won a contest or saved our town, but because through it, I recovered something much more precious than any prize or recognition. What, Grandma? You, my dear, I recovered you. The two women fell silent, lulled by the rhythmic creaking of the chair and the sounds of the night that began to envelop the small town in the mountains. The aroma of a new cake baking in the oven escaped through the open windows, promising that as long as there were hands willing to knead and hearts ready to share, some traditions would never come to an end. And in the empty kitchen, the old recipe notebook remained open on the table, its yellowed pages silently telling the story of women who, generation after generation, found in the art of feeding not only a means of nutrition, but a powerful form of love, resistance, and memory.